It's about defeat or conquest. Our presence here, in this body, in this life, at this time. Do we feel we are winning? Or when we look honestly at our state of mind, is there a sense of defeat, being defeated by feelings, by our perceptions, our thoughts, how we want the world, our bodies, our surroundings, the situations to be, versus what they really are like and sustained as. Because the temptation is very strong. During the last 3 weeks, and today will be the 4th week, where we covered the Mūlapariyāya Sutta, this wonderful discourse, deep discourse. We've seen again and again the Buddha pointing out how it's so powerful, the hold that our concepts have on us. Each of us might have different series of concepts, things that we hold valuable to us, meaningful, pertaining to life, undeniably important. But again and again, we saw how the Buddha showed us how it is really nothing to hold on to. Really, the concepts that we have, they are not what they really seem to be. But when we are holding on to what they seem to be, we are defeated. There's no conquest. There's another life goes down the drain. So to change that, the Buddha pulled us out from the world of the puthujjana, of a worldling, of a ordinary, unlearned, undisciplined, dense, superficially existing being who takes concepts as real, who takes relationships as real, who takes feelings as real. And then he put us into the mind state, the attitude of a seika, a noble disciple in training, someone's who is on the path of awakening. And we saw how the Buddha said, no, he should not be imagining. He should not be constantly involved in this visualization of these things that don't exist, but we make them existent. We make them real. So to fight that tendency, the Buddha was even warning the noble disciple in training, the seika, you should not visualize, you should not imagine. Be careful, because once you do, you're sucked into the vortex, you're pulled into the stories, you're pulled into the details and features. And then he pulled us out of that even further, and as to where this path could take us. And we saw last week how he presented us with the Arahant, who no longer imagines, but comprehends deeply. So freedom that we talk about is not to be found anywhere other than the moment that we relinquish our feelings, relinquish our concepts, that the hold that they have on us, the mind, where we have already defeated ourselves when we say, well, I'm sorry, I am my feelings. These feelings I cannot get rid of. You have to understand, I am my memories. These memories are me, I am them. We've already defeated ourselves because we are far past the point of no return when it comes to concepts being taken as real. And the Buddha's whole point in this Mūlapariyāya Sutta, which is to identify the root pattern of behavior of all mind objects, because everything is mind objects. No matter how sublime it might seem, no matter how trivial, how stupid, how silly, how dark, how stinky, how beautiful it might be, these are all mind objects. Bottom line, mind objects. And there is a mind that knows it, if the mind is aware. That's the practice, that's meditation, that's where freedom is to be found. That's how the Arahant becomes an Arahant. That's how a Seka becomes a Seka versus a Putujjana. A Seka is a Putujjana, was a Putujjana, but there was a moment where he or she said, you know, I'm going to allow the Dhamma to take hold of my life by trusting it, by questioning my feelings. And the moment that you relinquish your attachment to that feeling, that notion, that concept, that attachment, that identification with the thing, imagining with the thing, whatever the thing might be for you at that moment in your life, there is the breakthrough. No longer is the person a Putujjana, but they are a Seka. But if they continue on that path, continuously probing, trusting, not the feeling, but trusting the process of relinquishing the hold that feelings have, these darkening, and what turns your gaze into opaque and thick, covered in curtains of illusion is the identification with the feeling, with the details of observable things, visible things, audible sounds, lovely, annoying, neutral. Same thing with smells, same thing with tastes, touches, and ideas. The moment there is that trust in us to say, okay, I'm letting this go. It's not the end of the world. I don't have to be fully in by believing in this feeling and as if this is the end. If this, either this or, this is it. There's no turning back from this feeling. I have to commit fully. No, at that moment, relinquishing that, that's what made the Arahant no longer a Seka. He or she has become an Aseka, the one that has gone beyond the training, no longer a disciple in training. So today we come to the last portion of the Mūlapariyāya Sutta. And in the past 3 weeks, although it was very condensed, nevertheless, we were able to finish the first week with the Putujjana, the first type of person. Second is the Seka, the noble disciple in training, which I just mentioned. And then last week we talked about the Arahant. Today we talk about the Tathāgata, the fourth and the last, the final category of beings who, when facing realities, facing situations the same way as Putujjanas, Sekas, and Arahants, how is their behavior? What do they really see when they encounter these concepts, the 24 of which we discussed, and today we'll go over them. So here we see the Tathāgata, therefore. Well, first there is a distinction, because you've heard me mention many times, not just me, but many other bhikkhus in books, we see how the Buddha himself is an arahant. So what distinguishes the arahant from being a Tathāgata? Because the Buddha was also known as the Tathāgata. So, but not arahants, not all arahants are Tathāgatas. Tathāgatas are far few when they appear. The arahant has understood phenomena. Parinyaya or parinyatam, that's the Pali term. Here we see, however, the Buddha, who also obviously understands completely phenomena. And also, like the arahant, he no longer conceives it. He does not imagine. He does not dwell on it, but he sees it nevertheless, penetratingly. But he fully understands it to its final end. There's a difference between the arahant right there. One of the differences. The arahant fully understands it, but when we say fully understand it, whatever's there, he comprehends it. But the job of the Tathāgata is to penetrate even further than that, because nothing escapes the gaze of the Tathāgata. That's not the case with the arahant. So there's a spectrum, a range of understanding that is quite different. The Tathāgata sees the whole full range of comprehension. He has that. And that's why he's called a fully awakened, versus the disciple. No one is a teacher to the Tathāgata, but all arahants need teachers. There's another difference. The Tathāgata is what we understand as, by the way, it's a term that was available at the time. This was not something that was introduced by the Buddha. The Tathāgata was a term that people were using at that time for the liberated ones, the ones who are the vanquishers, the ones who have cut samsara, the ones who have overcome, defeated rebirth, for example. So each tradition had its own version of the Tathāgata. And just like the case was with different terms such as kamma, such as what it means to be a Brahmin, what is the true nature of samsara, the 31 layers of existence, all these, when the Buddha came to the scene, as it were, he presented a different, totally different, radically different explanation to all these different phenomena and concepts or principles, including Tathāgata, what it means to be a Tathāgata. So throughout the suttas, we see him explaining, and that's where our comments are coming from as well, in addition to those mentioned in the sutta itself. So the disciple who has reached the consummation of the training, the arahant, reached its completion by liberating oneself, which we see in the example of the bhikkhunis and the bhikkhus, and all those who have attained arahantship. Their range of understanding was quite limited compared to the Buddha's. That's why they would go and ask, questions from the Buddha, elaborations, even as arahants. Some arahants were much deeper in their understanding, such as Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Anuruddha, Venerable Mahamoggallana, Venerable Mahakassapa, etc. This is where we have the omniscience, the all-omniscient one, sabbanyutanyana, to have that knowledge of all-knowing. Now, this is, if you come from a Western point of view, you will look at this and say, oh, it's like the all-powerful, all-omniscient, God. which is completely unacceptable in Buddhism. Again, this was a principle that they were attributing to people like Mahavir and the other characters, the other founders of different traditions at the time of the Buddha, that were claiming to have this omniscience. And you have examples in the suttas where this is challenged and they don't know what to say. King Ajatasattu goes and asks each one of these, and he walks away completely, disappointed in them until he comes to the Buddha. So when we say all omniscient, as far as all phenomena are concerned, their depth, where, what is happening, it's not on a superficial level, such as saying, well, the Buddha, did he know, the Tathāgata, did he know about airplanes? Does he know how an engine works? He should know then if he's omniscient for all time. That is not what is meant. As it relates to conditionality of phenomena, as it relates to action, as it relates to what happens if this is done here this way, or why did this happen, the Buddha is the one who can actually unravel it and point out exactly what happened where, because of what tendencies, what is taking place now can be observed. So it's far more existentially pertinent than what we typically understand by all omniscience. So that is a different also factor that we need to understand between the Arahant and the Tathāgata. So he fully comes to know, therefore, whatever there is to be known. Nothing is left out. He sees it in all their nuances, in all their connections. And that is how you have a Tathāgata being able to, teach the Dhamma. So his full range of knowing is the thing which allows him to discover the Dhamma, which allows him to attain Buddhahood, which we call Samma Sambuddha, fully, perfectly self-awakened Buddha. That's what I meant by earlier by saying that he doesn't have a teacher. And that is another distinguishing major feature between the Tathāgata and all Arahants. All Arahants require there to be Dhamma, require there to be someone who teaches the Dhamma. So the reason why we do have Arahants, when we have had all throughout history, since this sasana began, this dispensation of the Buddha, Buddha Gautama, the Buddha of our age, the Arahants have attained Arahantship because the Buddha or one of his disciples have taught it. And that's how we have maintained the suttas. The suttas is serving that. It's a representation, it's a proxy of the presence of Arahants, which could not have happened without the presence of a Buddha. Because of the presence of the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha says the world will never be short of Arahants in this dispensation, which you only find Tathāgatas, by the way. So this is the first main, difference. And the second one is the method of attaining freedom or Nibbāna that I mentioned is, one needs there to be a teacher, the other one doesn't. The Buddha, in fact, never has a teacher to guide him to become a Buddha. Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta were not his teachers on the path to awakening. They simply showed him how to attain to the 7th and 8th jhānas, but it was very much compartmentalized into that, and they did not know how to break free themselves from that idea of self, atta, craving, letting go of mana, conceit, delusion, moha. None of those things were shown by the teachers because they were clueless. They were very much blind themselves. That's why the Buddha, to be Siddhartha, went off on his way after he reached the consummation of what those other teachers had taught. So it's completely walking into the darkness. There's nobody to guide you except his own intentions, except his own vows, except his own efforts at attaining perfections, fulfilling those perfections, such as his metta, such as his truthfulness, such as his energy, his meditative endurance and ardency, all those things, which does not or do not simply happen in one lifetime or 100 or 100,000 lifetimes. In the case of our Buddha Gautama, he had spent over 4.5 Mahakalpas. Mahakalpa is great kalpa. Each kalpa, think of it as roughly, think of the Big Bang until now, till the end of the expansion period of this universe, this expansion, until from the moment of Big Bang until it reaches that maximum point. It's like a tennis ball that you toss up. When it reaches up, that moment, and then it stops and it comes down, that you can think of it as a kappa or kalpa, an era. And then coming back to the Big Bang, that's the crunch, expansion and the crunch. And that's another kalpa. And during that time where it comes to that point of singularity, there is another kalpa. So you have several of these making up one Mahakalpa. So we're talking about incredibly long, unimaginable period of time that passes for the individual to maintain that focus, to maintain that drive. So the Tathāgata is the one who makes the Dhamma really, well, discovers it. Now, there are two kinds of Tathāgatas, which we will see in the suttas, last portion. And the Tathāgatas that are being made, they're separated, rather. One is the Tathāgata who attains but refuses to teach, doesn't feel the need, doesn't have that desire. Remember, our own Buddha Gautama was on the cusp. Some say he was about to become a paccekabuddha, not a Tathāgata that would teach the Dhamma. And that's why Brahma Sahampati appeared in front of him, asking him, begging him, because he said, long has it been, Lord, where the Dhamma has disappeared in existence. There's no Dhamma. So now is the time. Long has this universe been waiting for you. And now we finally have a Buddha. Please, please consider the many, many who have very little dust in their eyes, who will see if the Dhamma is taught to them. Now, the Tathāgata that doesn't teach is the one that is firm in his decision not to teach, and that's it. So the world, the existence, still remains in darkness, essentially, because Dhamma is not taught by him. So the first, after toiling so many eons, by the way, to reach that perfection, the Tathāgata, the first Tathāgata we will see, is referring to the paccekabuddha, or the silent Buddha, or the non-teaching Buddha. But the second Tathāgata, which we will cover today, is the Tathāgata that Lord Buddha is referring to himself and his type of Tathāgatas, of whom there were several throughout history, undocumented. Only a Buddha can know about the presence of the other Tathāgatas, by the way. And it's wonderful to go over the suttas and the discourses, and you see how the Buddha is talking as if he's sitting there with the other Tathāgatas. He's referring to what it took for those Tathāgatas to attain, how long it took for each of them, how long was the lifespan of the people at that time, who were the students, who were the chief disciples, what was his style. But they all teach the same, the Four Noble Truths. They teach the way out of suffering, because they teach the fact that there is suffering, and they teach the way out of suffering. And they're the ones who teach paccekabuddha, causal relations. No one other than the Buddha can teach that, can reveal that, because they are so penetrating in their comprehension to the fullest extent. So, without talking more on this, I want us to just jump right into going over the Tathāgata, the first type of Tathāgata, which is the paccekabuddha. I will try to, because there's a refrain section as the other ones we've gone over this past 2 or 3 weeks. I will say a few of them. I will mention them, read them, but I will focus mostly on the second Tathāgata today. I'm going to try, because that's where you're going to see the difference. So let's start. The Tathāgata. Here, bhikkhus, the Tathāgata, who is the self-awakened Buddha, has also already destroyed the heart's contaminants, the asavas, and therefore, being an arahant himself, he too has realized himself through direct and complete understanding. What? Out of earth, right? The first concept, the first principle. Thus, while looking at earth, and all that has the solidity or material quality of the earth element, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends earth as earth. You don't see any imagining here, of course. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about earth. He does not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to earth. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from earth. He does not imagine earth as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider it as mine. That is, because he does not delight in nor because of earth. And why is this the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood what there is to be understood, all the way to its end. This I declare. So there is nothing left out in the case of the Tathāgata that still needs to be explored, that is not probed fully. The Tathāgata is the one who probes deeply to the very bottom, into the sides. He never leaves any nooks and crannies of things to be still uncovered. That's why when a teaching is given, it's not a teaching that can be ameliorated, changed, improved upon, which is one thing that has led many other traditions that came after the Buddha's teaching, after his demise, after his death. People came up with their own versions, their additions, this and that, within what we today consider as the Theravada tradition. But we ignore this. For centuries, there was no Mahayana. For over 1,000 years, there was no Vajrayana as such. The Theravadins themselves were coming up with different versions, different additions, different additions, commentaries, for example. Their own versions, their own tweakings. And it makes it very difficult for people, including researchers, to identify the wheat from the chaff. But well, no wonder, people looked upon this sutta as something that, it's beyond. It's like, they've really done a big damage to the sutta, including at the end, which we'll see how they've added things to it, to minimize its importance, to take away the brilliance of this sutta, because they miss out on what is being said. Imagining pertains to everything that you see, you hear, you touch, you taste, you smell, but especially you think. You rationally try to mentally absorb and digest and carry with you. Well, in a fancy way, you basically are saying identification with that thing. And that is what the sutta is all about. From a Putujjana level all the way to Tathāgata level of understanding. Water, apo. Similarly, when looking at water and all that has the fluidity or cohesive quality of the water element, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends water as water. Again, which Tathāgata is he referring to here? The paccekabuddha, the silent, non-teaching Buddha, who is still a Buddha. He is also fully self-awakened Buddha. It's the details in their, not the experience, but what are they doing? The understanding is deep. One, however, takes that understanding and really, like a brilliant sun, blows it up into distinct, because we don't know what, the paccekabuddha's mind. All we know is that a person is also a Tathāgata, is a Buddha. Okay, that's the end of the story as far as we understand. However, we only know that the Tathāgata who teaches is the one who's teaching the Four Noble Truths. He is the one who's teaching the Noble Eightfold Path, the 12 links of causal relations, etc., etc., etc. The 37 aids to awakening. The Tathāgata is not teaching us anything. We just know through the teachings of the Buddha who taught the Dhamma. Because unfortunately, the paccekabuddha does not grace us with that, because of his own intentions set by him over incalculable lifetimes. And no one can judge him for that, because ultimately he is a Buddha. He has broken free from samsara. Nothing could touch him. He's free. But that doesn't do much for us. Nevertheless, out of respect, this is Tathāgata. Out of respect, we are briefly going to be discussing these, a few more of these, and then I'll jump, as I mentioned, to the Tathāgata that is more interesting for us. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about water. Why is that? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood what there is to be understood, all the way to its end. This I declare. Tejo. Similarly, while looking at fire and all that has the heating or temperature quality of the fire element, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly and comprehends earth as fire as fire. I'm sorry, there's a typo here. I have to fix that. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about fire. He does not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to fire. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from fire. He does not imagine fire as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider it as mine. That is because he does not delight in nor because of fire. And why is that the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood what there is to be understood, all the way to its end. This I declare. Similarly, while looking at water and all that has the moving or pressuring quality of the air or wind element, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends air as air. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about air. Why is that? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood what there is to be understood, all the way to its end. And this I declare. So this goes on with all the 24 categories of concepts. Remember, these were concepts that were prevalent at the time. And the commentary also, commentaries, plural, on the sutta also highlight that the audience, the bhikkhus to whom the Buddha was giving this discourse, all had come from different areas, different backgrounds within Vedic tradition. So these concepts were all part and parcel of who and what they thought as, what constituted learning or spiritual practice or beliefs for these monks. So all 24 of them, including Nibbāna, their own understanding. So the commentaries were basically saying that this sutta was simply trying to rebuttal all their beliefs, to shake up their beliefs to their roots. For which reason, at the end, the commentators have added, this is the singular sutta throughout, 84,000 teachings, where you see the end of it being mentioned how the book, the group of bhikkhus who were sitting to listen to this discourse were displeased and not delighted in hearing the sutta. This is unprecedented. Never do you see that. I've never encountered such a statement at the end of a sutta. But this one does. The commentators have even explained that as to why they think that's the case, because the Buddha basically was pulling the rug from under their belief systems by teaching them such an elaborate, such a dense, and many cases people say complicated sutta. It's not complicated. It's simply he's giving the tools, the map with which to understand the Dhamma itself and every other discourse to follow. Now remember, the Buddha did not teach this and then the other Majjhima Nikāya suttas. These books, the middle-length discourses, were even titled as such, placed in that order within the first council. So the individuals who placed Mūlapariyāya Sutta, this sutta, as the first of all the other 151 suttas to follow it into one category, they were the ones who called it the middle-length discourses compared to the long discourses, such as the Digha Nikāya. Okay? And so they knew the Arahants compiled the suttas to a great extent in the first council. And there was a reason to place this as the key. Venerable Ananda, Venerable Mahakassapa's hands touched this sutta. They placed it in this order. How do we know? It's good to ask. Emperor Ashoka. Fortunately for us, he was the great record keeper. Time-wise, only a few, not far, only about 300 years, the separation between them. But on his edicts, on these huge columns, sandstone columns, he carved these Nikayas, Majjhima Nikāya, Digha Nikāya, and then he also listed the books. That's how we know. So things were added, but they didn't need to be added later on, because here we're seeing the fullness of the teaching of the Dhamma. So without further ado, I want to jump into the second section of the Tathāgata. The second type of Tathāgata there is. He's the one that we know and witness throughout the suttas or discourses. He is our historical Buddha who has, and the only way that we would know about the paccekabuddhas, by the way, the silent Buddhas, is through the Buddhas, the Tathāgatas who teach the Dhamma. Otherwise, you would never know about the paccekabuddhas. It's impossible. You wouldn't know. Because there's no Dhamma at the time. So many, many eons later, the Buddha who attains Buddhahood and teaches the Dhamma is the one who's pointing these things out to us, as well as the differences between them. So the whole entire dispensation of the sasana, the Buddha sasana, the Dhamma that we have is thanks to the second Tathāgata, the second type of Tathāgata, Lord Buddha Gautama being the one for us in this age. The very possibility of the removal of suffering is because of him. The freedom from samsara is because of him. And he's the one who's being referred to in this section. So right mindfulness, vipassana, is thanks to the Tathāgata. There's no right mindfulness, there's no vipassana when there is no Buddha, when there is no sasana. Webu Sayadaw would say in his talks to people to encourage them, pointing the facts at them, to them, saying, this is the only time where you can practice vipassana. This is the only time where you can attain wisdom. This is the only time when the Dhamma is still available. The Dhamma, the sasana is still available where we can make the breakthrough. Because once the sasana is over, there's no Dhamma, forget about it. You will not attain. Not even the first stage of awakening. It's impossible when there's no Dhamma. Impossible. Which is terrible. That's why the urgency must be there. Because you won't find in the dark age when there's no Dhamma, you won't see a Buddha. You won't see a disciple of the Buddha. You won't see even a segment of the Dhamma. Not even a verse. Not even a single verse. It's dark age, literally. So the three trainings, the triple training of Sila, Samadhi, Panya disappear. And by the way, who brought them about? The Tathāgata, this Tathāgata. So let's continue this section. Here, bhikkhus, the Tathāgata, who is the self-awakened Buddha, has also already destroyed the heart's contaminants, the asavas, and therefore, being an arahant himself, he too has released himself through direct and complete understanding. Thus, while looking at earth and all that has the solidity or material quality of the earth element, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends earth as earth. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things, pertaining to or about earth. He does not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to earth. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from earth. He does not imagine earth as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider it as mine. That is because he does not delight in nor because of earth. This is key. The delighting, nandi and passion, raga, these two are what drives this machine of imagination that we have. It's a machine. We don't question it. Every single thought you have, look at it carefully. There's a slight, depending on how gross it is, but at the very least, there is a subtle presence of delighting, a promise of delighting, waiting for us if we engage in this. If it's a clicking of your mailbox, you're trying to look to see if your email is boxes, you received something, or a text, or a phone, or something, or looking in some direction, or something you saw and you want to you do a double take. You turn and you look again. What is there? There's something there. There's Nandi. There's not just Nandi. There's also Raga. Nandi, Raga. That's why the Buddha joined the two. Delighting and passion seeking. That is the driving force behind imagination and the perpetuation of more imagination. Meanwhile, we're not seeing that there's a arising and ceasing of that. Of everything, including the breath. It's not a single stretch of inhale inhale and exhale. So arising and ceasing. It's not even that. Within every millisecond of that inhalation, there's a rising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing. It's like tiny little domino pieces leaning against each other. It's like the frames of a movie, one bumping against each other. Rising and falling, rising and falling, starting and ending, starting and ending. And then you're looking at the bigger picture and you're just seeing, oh, it's one strip of film, one inhalation. Meanwhile, there isn't such a one thing at all. That's why the Buddha taught anatta. But because we do it often, we are ignorant of the fact that there's a rising and ceasing. That's why every single time you inhale or every time you experience something, you want to redo the exact thing, never shows up, never happens, never comes out. Even the inhalation, it's never the same. Try it. Because each one of these things is made up of many risings and fallings. But the Tathāgata sees this. And then there is this awakening that happens because you're seeing that there's nothing to be delighted in. Why? Because you realize dispassion, fading away takes place. You're not excited about looking over there because you looked at the pattern that's guiding your mechanism. You see the sankharas, how we have been a toy at the hands of our sankharas, blindly, foolishly following the pattern, habitual patterns, the sankharas, without any question. Why am I looking? Why am I going to look there? Why am I going to taste it again? Why am I promising myself more of this? What is the driving force? Because I am re-seeking that re-experiencing of re-delighting. And that keeps the passion going. Regurgitating the same morsels of food. So the Tathāgata doesn't delight in nor because of birth. And why is this the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood that the very root of all that is suffering is itself the delighting in, cherishing, and the looking forward to the experiencing of it. And thus the Tathāgata has directly seen how it is through the longing and craving for re-becoming that one is reborn. Because of birth, then one inevitably has to undergo the inescapably painful processes of getting old, sickness, and dying. Do you see now the difference between this Tathāgata and the previous one, which we covered 4 concepts, 4 sections? Here you're seeing the paccekabuddha, links from the dependent arising. You're seeing clearly where he's saying about bhava, the link of bhava, the connector to birth. What brings birth about is the desire for re-becoming. That is taught by a Tathāgata, only a Tathāgata. This kind of a Tathāgata, the Buddha is saying. And because of birth, what follows naturally, inescapably, is getting old, aging, decaying, illnesses, sicknesses, and death. That's suffering, that's dukkha. For this reason, on witnessing the cessation and destruction of all kinds of cravings, the dispassion and fading away that resulted from that very understanding, see, this is what the Buddha is saying, what I was saying earlier, repeating it, because as you see things, suddenly something happens to the level and intensity, the saturation of your craving. It's like you're waiting for Santa Claus to come in, and mom and dad or people, say, "Oh, he's coming in. You hear the noise, and you're excited. You're about to laugh, cry. You're all full of excitement, and somehow you peek through the crack in the door and you see that your Uncle Joe is putting on the Santa Claus suit. Or you see him with a beard underneath the white beard, dark brown beard, and you see, these are things that happen to me, by the way. And I remember what I felt. I'm like, are you kidding me? You mean to say Santa Claus is not real? Suddenly, everything I saw, everything I looked at, the wall decorations, Christmas decorations on the streets, the songs, everything, Santa Claus is coming, to all these things suddenly lost something for me. The passion suddenly diminished. Why? Because there was a comprehension, something, a discovery, an understanding that was not there. But the good thing about this is that along with the craving diminishing, the fading away, there's also relinquishment. Paccekabuddha, the Buddha says. And he continues, the relinquishment of all those cravings and the absolute abandonment by walking away from all that they promise is how the Tathāgata has self-awakened. Because you're no longer looking at whatever comes from the six sense doors as your way for tasting freedom, your way for tasting satisfaction. Remember that gratification, asada, and then the danger, the terror of that a person who understands, experiences adinava, from going after this, the craving after this. But it is only through the stepping out, nissarana, that a person is able to relinquish suffering. Because they're all connected. Paticca samuppada, the 12 length causations of causation, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the three trainings, the three characteristics of existence. You do all these numbers, you put all these categorizations, but never in separate boxes. They're all connected. They're all saying the one thing, one thing. They're all leading us out of more pain, more suffering. And that pain, that suffering is directly connected to the presence of craving, conceit, and views. That is what we are being defeated by, as I began today's talk mentioning. So here in this sutta and every sutta that the Buddha taught and his noble disciples have, that's the effort that is being placed for in doing, in showing us to break free from these three things: craving, conceit, and views, which unfortunately plague us terribly, especially now in this time period in humanity's life. Thus, he is the Tathāgata who has realized through his own efforts the supreme and perfect awakening by personally and directly seeing the very truth about all these cravings. This I declare, there's nothing else. And there's no secret. Do you see any secret being hinted at, inferred, anywhere in the level of what the Buddha is discovering? Even his depth of comprehension to the end, the Buddha is saying to us what that pertains to. And that's why he's able to teach the Dhamma. That's why he's able to teach how to relieve ourselves from suffering, from coming back and again and again and again from life after life after life after life. Without that understanding, that's not, it's impossible. But he's not saying the Tathāgata lives somewhere over there and he's surrounded by secret things. attainments that you will never know. He doesn't even say that. It has to have a purpose. The whole Dhamma. And that's what we're being introduced here. Water, apo. Similarly, when looking at, in fact, I'm going to just jump forward section by section because it's the same refrain and I want to spare my voice. Next, he goes to the living beings, Bhut section, section 5. Similarly, while looking at living beings and all their diverse qualities about them, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends living beings as living beings. Excuse me. This because he sees and understands them through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about living beings. He does not imagine himself existing among nor in relation to living beings. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from living beings. He does not imagine living beings as things to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider them as mine. That is because he does not delight in nor because of living beings. So he's not identified with them, but he's not aloof in a sense that he's indifferent to the presence of other beings around him, whether human or not. Animals took care of him for a whole entire vassa at one point when bhikkhus were deplorable in their behavior towards the Tathāgata, the teacher. He said, it's much better for me to go into seclusion, into the forest, and that's what he did. And a monkey and an elephant came and brought him food every day and water. How could the Lord Buddha not see and be indifferent to them? He even said thank you at the end of the vassa to them, to these two animals. Similarly, to having entire congregations of sanghas, notably the two chief disciples. When they died, about 6 months before Lord Buddha died, he turned to the whole congregation of the sangha, of the monks, bhikkhus, and he said, bhikkhus, subtly, he said, look at the moment of humanity, beauty. He says, suddenly this whole sangha looks empty to me, without Sariputta and Moggallāna. Who said that? Who can say that? But is he identified with it? These are statements from the Buddha himself. We know for a fact they're recorded. Okay. But does that make him passionate, delighting in those emotions, sobbing over it, overtaken by it? No. But he's also acknowledging his humanity. We don't see that in people's renditions of what the Buddha was, who he was, or who they think he is. But at the same time, he was not attached. Even to his anger when, he didn't have an anger. That's what I'm trying to say. When Devadatta came and tried to kill him at least 3 times and then tried to destroy the Sangha, the Buddha never closed the door on him, metaphorically. He always allowed some, for him to come back. And so he didn't feel, something was being taken. And similarly, when his bhikkhus attained arahantship, he never considered the Dhamma to be his possession. The Buddha, the one who discovers the Dhamma, he never considered it as his possession. It's not a possession. It's not a thing to be possessed. Similarly, with all these concepts, whether it's the earth, water, fire, air, living beings, can we say that about the beings who mean something to us in our lives? Can we really say that we don't delight in them, that we don't attribute more imaginings because of them, for them, in relation to them? And why is this the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood that the very root of all that suffering is itself the delighting in, cherishing, and the looking forward to the experiencing of it. Thus, the Tathāgata has directly seen how it is through the longing and craving for rebecoming that one is reborn. So every single one of these refrains includes within it paticca samuppada, causal relations. It's because of that longing, craving to become, again, re-become, that one is reborn. Because of birth, then one inevitably has to undergo the inescapably painful processes of getting old, sickness, and of dying. For this reason, on witnessing the destruction of all kinds of cravings, dispassion, and fading away that resulted from that very understanding, the relinquishment of all those cravings, and the absolute abandonment by walking away from all that they promise, is how the Tathāgata has self-awakened. If and when we have paccekabuddha demonstrated in our behavior towards the thing that we're experiencing, paccekabuddha here is the relinquishment, the dropping away, letting it drop. It's not the end of the world when you walk away from a feeling you're having. You do not have to wear it. You do not have to inhabit it. Your feeling, your concepts, your perceptions, your sankharas, they are not you. But the problem is, we are having a feeling and we make it our own. We sign off on it. We put our stamp of identity on it. And the Buddha is saying, walk away. Walk away. It just requires some trust in the beginning. And then you feel the freedom that comes. Adana patinissaga. Adana means to pick up. Patinissaga means to release, relinquish, give up. No one is saying ignore the experience. No one is saying completely deny the fact that this thing you're seeing is there. But let it pass through you as if you're an open tunnel, a pipe. Let it go through you, unfiltered by emotional nuances that are dying to pick up something from life, from the six sense stores, to give meaning, while hiding from us the fact that it is, in fact, impermanent, it is drenched in suffering, and it's totally without a core. So where is the meaning then? It's all about delighting, becoming passionate. That's what this whole world is teaching us from start to end. And that's what this sutta is teaching us, to walk away from. The delighting and getting passionate about things. Buddha continues with the other devas and other principles of God figures, things like that, that people used to take for, as they do now, the Almighty Lord or God, this, that. They were prevalent at the time too, in different ways and nuances. And the Buddha is applying the same litmus test to every single one of them. And you can, it's already on the website, the PDF of this whole sutta. And then he talks about the other principles of the formless realms, the dimension of infinity of space, the dimension of infinity of consciousness, the dimension of nothingness. These are all jhānic states, high levels of meditation, attainments, states of being, dimensions of experience that are beyond the form realm. So the sensory impingement is detached while and during that time that the person is experiencing them. The sense of identification with the body is dislodged during that state, as well as the last one that I didn't mention, sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. These are respectively the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th jhānas, the arupa jhānas he's referring to. And the Buddha here again is saying he doesn't imagine them to be anything other than what they are. I wonder how many times people mention that in those so-called jhana retreats that have been popping all over the planet during the last 10, 12 years or so. How many of those students are actually being taught by teachers, whether lay teachers or monastics, that, hey, don't let this get to your head. Don't walk around trying to brandish, don't walk around or telling yourself at least that you can attain this state, you can attain this state, etc., etc. Because there's identification and there's delighting. Drop it. It's just a station along the way. So the Buddha is also referring to that and saying the Buddha never becomes delighted in and because of those things. He doesn't see himself in relation to it. So he never takes it as a thing, as a state of being that's concrete, that's there, that has dimensions to it, that you can hold and carry home with you or write home about. These are just phases. Just phases. They have their role to play, yes, but they are just phases, beginning and end, because they are conditioned, even. States, these states, meditative states, are conditioned. They're sankhata. You had to work towards them. If there's one piece missing, then it will fail. It will not work. The recipe will not work. Hence, it is conditioned. Nibbāna itself is the unconditioned, however. Nothing to grab. You can't even delight in Nibbāna, we will see. Which terrifies some people. Because, hey, at least if I'm giving up this, the prize has to be bigger than this. Right? It's all economics. Okay, I'll give up this, daddy, like a child. Okay, Johnny, you need to drop this so that I can give you this lollipop. That's no good because I need to give you this bigger present. Okay, we're very sneaky. We bring that sneakiness into the Dhamma, and that's terrible. Even Nibbāna itself is like the grand prize. Oh, who doesn't want to have the grand prize? Everybody's drooling from the corner of their lips, from their mouth, craving, lusting after Nibbāna because it's the biggest prize. That's the secret that nobody wants to talk about in Dhamma circles. And these are so-called the legitimate Dhamma circles. The practitioners, the real. Meanwhile, there's lust. There's passion there. And so long as those guys are there, forget it. It's not going to happen. You see how this is a map, this sutta? Because it's challenging all the other unspoken things that we do, unchallenged things that we do in the name of Dhamma. And that's why this sutta terrifies some people. Because it really is pulling the rug, if not from under those bhikkhus' feet, it definitely will pull from our own feet. But it's all those things that are unconditioned and adhammic. That is the thing which is being pulled away from us, which is good. The Buddha is removing the veils of illusion. That's why the title of this sutta, the root behavior of all patterns, to see, identify the patterns of all mind objects. The root is being uncovered. And it's not about someone else's experience or their own views or somebody else's concepts or conceits. No, it is our own that this sutta is referring to. Our unique, our own personal hang-ups. That is what this sutta is directly targeting. And without targeting, it's no longer Dhamma. The Dhamma has to target our weakest points. It has to reveal the darkest spots. the blind spots in our practice, if we allow the Dhamma, it will come in and reveal it to us. So long as you are camouflaging them, however, you are defeated. And there goes another life. What is seen? Ditthi. Similarly, while looking at what is seen and all that has the quality of being visible or in being seen and observed by the eyes, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends what is seen as that which is seen. This because he sees and understands this through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about the thing being seen, knowing it just as seen, through and through, and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing in relation to the seen. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from what is seen. He does not imagine the seen as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider the seen as mine. That is because he does not delight in nor because of what is seen. And why is this the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood that the very root of all that is suffering is itself the delighting in, cherishing, and the looking forward to the experiencing of it. In this case, it is the thing being seen. Okay? Even the Buddha's own physical presence, people looked at it and they wanted to take that home with them in their minds, in their hearts, and worship it and see it as the Dhamma, with their affection, showering upon it every day, offering flowers, this and that, but while objectifying the Buddha, while treating it as the main dasasana, while treating it as the thing to be done with this life, meaning worshiping the Buddha. It's ridiculous. Thus, the Tathāgata has directly seen how it is through the longing and craving for re-becoming that one is reborn. Because of birth, then one inevitably has to undergo the inescapably painful processes of getting old, sickness, and dying. I'm jumping here. What is heard? Sutta. Similarly, while looking at what is heard and all that has the quality of being heard or in being listened to and observed by the ears, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends what is heard as that which is heard. This because he sees and understands this through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about the thing being heard, knowing it just as heard, through and through, and nothing else. These might seem rather redundant for some. Okay, I get it. That's usually the theme that runs in the mind of Puthujjanas when they first come across this sutta. But you have to understand you are always under attack by the six sense doors, your own six senses. Non-stop, unless you are in an unconscious state. Your eyes are always, whether you have them closed or not, they're always images that your mind, your brain is seeing. So you have to maintain restraint. Your ears are always bringing in information. You have to maintain restraint. Your nose is bringing information. You have to maintain restraint. Your tongue is bringing in information. You have to maintain restraint. Your body is always, always, always bringing in information. You have to maintain restraint. And especially your mind is non-stop bringing in information. You have to maintain restraint, especially there. What is sensed? Mutta. And what is known or cognized? Vijnana. Similarly, while looking at what is known or cognized and all that has the quality of being known or cognized and observed by the mind, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends what is known as that which is known. This because he sees and understands this through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagines things pertaining to or about the thing being cognized, knowing it just as known, through and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing in relation to the known. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from what is known. He does not imagine the known as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider the known as mine. That is because he does not delight in nor because of what is known. Remember, if your mind is experiencing that concept, that image, that trigger of information that's coming in, that vibration that has a beginning and an end, if there is sati observing it carefully, you keep your hands to yourself. You don't reach over and try to grab some features about that thing. Try to get cozy with it. Look for some commonality, some common ground for you to appreciate and get delighted about, or delight in, or seek a repetition of a delightful experience, a feeling. That's why we have been slaves to our six senses. We are always at the mercy of our six senses. That's why I kept saying we have to have restraint. Samvara is the key. Otherwise, we're always leaking. One of the terms for asava is leakage. Definitions of asava is leakage. That's how we get contaminated. A person who goes ahead and practices very good healthy lifestyles such as exercising on one end, but goes ahead and smokes cigarettes, just cigarettes, or drinks whiskey, or drinks some alcohol, or does drugs. But they say, hey, but I practice, I actually exercise, and they do. They run 3 miles a day, 5 miles a day. Some people I knew ran 10 miles a day. But then you look at them, they're miserable. Or somebody who practices sila all through and through, but with the very important element missing, meaning right view missing. They say, I have to be virtuous. And then you look at them, their behavior, you look very carefully, you probe, and you see they are really atrocious to be around. They're full of hatred towards themselves and others. What is that? What's going on? There's some delighting going on. There's some passionate presence there. There's an identification with something. And so long as that is there, Nibbāna is far away for us to take place. So, because Lord Buddha says, the Tathāgata has completely understood that the very root of all that is suffering is itself the delighting in, cherishing, and the looking forward to the experience of it. So if you have suffering, which requires honesty from our part to stop and, just take a pause and ask yourself, and usually it shows up in the form of pressure, tension, heat in the body somewhere. That's why you have to be connected to the body, your body. You have to know how your body feels. You have to learn how to inhabit your body for the sake of understanding what's happening with the emotions. For that reason, many people are living from their neck up. Neck up. They're lost in their concepts. That's why most people who think they're practicing Dhamma have no clue what the Dhamma is. You cannot experience, you cannot understand, you cannot penetrate the Dhamma, let alone attain Nibbāna without connecting to the body. It's impossible. Impossible. The Buddha himself was living proof of this. He had done it for over 6.5 years. He knew exactly what this entails. That's why he walked away. He said, no, I have to connect with the body. What was he trying to say? The body becomes the conduit with which we can interpret, understand what's really happening, the finer nuances of emotions, feelings, anusayas, the hidden, latent tendencies that are there lurking about. You might think you're practicing Dhamma, you might think you're practicing Sila, you might think you're the wisest person that ever walked the earth after the Buddha. But when things aren't going the way you like them to, already you're feeling chest pains, back pain, toe pain, you can't stand people, your breathing is fluctuated, all these things. Or your body's fine, but somehow you emotionally are not okay. There's always some sign, some signal triggered. So long as we are not in tune and attuned to the body, we won't know what's happening. And once you do have that awareness, suddenly the curiosity will tell you, why is this happening? So that is dukkha. Most people think they don't have dukkha. I've had people in the world, different parts of the world, telling me, trying to challenge me while, Q&A sections of a talk at the end, oh, Bhante, I don't have any dukkha though. People have said that, grown up people, past middle age, telling me they don't have dukkha. Imagine the craziness that one has to say that. Or being detached from what's really happening to them. They're delusional. Many people are living deluded lives, and that's why we reach the end, but it's way too late. The body is incapable of practice. There's no more life left in the tank. We're about to die. And there goes another life. There we have another defeat. So the Buddha's point here is to help us to gain the understanding and to attain relinquishment, to give ourselves that relinquishment. Nobody else will. And he's showing us how he did it, how he processes information. He's giving us the inner mechanism of how a Tathāgata functions in relation to the causal relations of paccekabuddha. Do you have the clinging, the desire to become again? Whether for the next moment, birth of the next moment, or an actual birth. In my next life, I want to be born there. I want to experience that. That's already the poison. You're the wrong path you set yourself on. So stop it. Otherwise, you're past the point of no return. You're going to experience excruciating pain. A lifetime of it. Next, he talks about unity or oneness, and then diversity or multiplicity. The all, and then Nibbāna. That's what I will focus on. The last concept. Similarly, on having already tasted and known Nibbāna directly, the Tathāgata fully knows and directly comprehends it as Nibbāna itself. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge. Therefore, he does not perceive nor objectifies Nibbāna, nor imagines it as a separate thing called Nibbāna that is out there. He does not imagine himself existing in relation to Nibbāna. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from Nibbāna. He does not imagine Nibbāna as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider Nibbāna as mine. And thus he does not identify with it, nor becomes absorbed into some kind of an intoxication for or because of Nibbāna. And why is this the case? It is because the Tathāgata has completely understood that the very root of all that is suffering is itself the delighting in, cherishing, and the looking forward to the experiencing of it. Even Nibbāna. Thus, the Tathāgata has directly seen how it is through the longing and craving for becoming, for rebecoming, bhava, that one is reborn. Because of birth, then one inevitably has to undergo the inescapably painful processes of getting old, sickness, and of dying. For this reason, on witnessing the destruction of all kinds of cravings, the dispassion and fading away that resulted from that very understanding, the relinquishment of all those cravings, and the absolute abandonment by walking away from all that they promise, is how the Tathāgata has self-awakened. There's no secret. The Buddha himself is laying out his method, his map, how he attained. There's nothing mystical about this path. There's nothing mystical about the Dhamma. This is not taking anything of value, beauty from the Dhamma, by the way. There's nothing, no secret about the Dhamma. It's everything is laid out. Thus, he is the Tathāgata who has realized through his own efforts the supreme and perfect awakening by personally and directly seeing the very truth about all these cravings. This I declare. This is what the Blessed One said. And those bhikkhus, the way I, by the way, translated it at the end, I changed it. Usually, if you read the sutta anywhere, in any book, any digital resource, you will see it. When you come before I read my translations of it, you will see it being said, those bhikkhus were not delighted in the words of the Tathāgata. That I firmly, wholeheartedly, in my bones, I know to be untrue. Because Lord Buddha would never, ever teach a sutta, a discourse like this, a giant sutta like this, to a group of questionable bhikkhus, questionable in their loyalty to the truth, deceitful bhikkhus who were sitting there, holding their tongue, biting their tongue, waiting for the Buddha to stop, and then to show their grudge by resentment, because the commentaries tell us that they were full of resentment. That's why they did not delight in the Buddha's words, which is, sad to say, hogwash. Has nothing to do with the true bhikkhu, because only the Buddha would never teach a sutta like this with so many dimensions and nuances of understanding, so beautifully latticed, so beautifully weaved together, stage by stage, to a bunch of bhikkhus who were not already ready to become arahants. So the commentaries eventually came up with their own versions, as if, oh yes, then the bhikkhus had the change of heart. For that reason, the Buddha gave another talk, Godatta, I forgot the sutta's name, and that, on hearing that sutta, those same bhikkhus attained arahantship. No. We have to also understand that things did not just get transported from the first council all the way to us intact, perfectly wrapped in cellophane, or in some special canister, some special container that nobody touched. For the first 500-600 years, there was no writing. It was all repetition, recitation, from one person to the next, from one teacher to the student. Living libraries of suttas in the form of recitations. But when you are dealing with a sutta like this, and you have putujjanas reciting the suttas, not arahants or noble disciples, you will definitely have people who are not delighting in those suttas. So this is not a theory, this is not an assumption on my behalf, on my part, rather. There's so many different pieces of evidence that we can look at in the case of the suttas, where had the Buddha seen the minds of the bhikkhus not being ready, he would have stopped by the first concept, by the first paragraph. He would never have continued. And he would have sent them off to, let's say, Venerable Mahakachana, go ahead, or Venerable Ananda, go over there, let him elaborate for you. He would never, ever have gone into such depth. And in this version, it came out to be 92 pages on Microsoft Word, size 12 fonts. This is my translation. It's a long sutta, that's what I'm trying to say. So the Buddha would never, ever have a group of bhikkhus listen to such an in-depth sutta and then walk away disgruntled or unhappy with the teacher, or the Dhamma they receive. That's a tremendously lost opportunity, and you don't see that in the whole of suttas. And interestingly enough, you never hear anything about this by the Buddha, not commentators, mentioning this event at any point in all of the suttas. We're talking about thousands and thousands of suttas. At least one should have pointed back to this sutta, and specifically the bhikkhus not being pleased or delighted. So all the fingers are pointing away from a possibility that such a thing could have happened, because this is a giant, and a giant sutta, a giant discourse, cannot be given to mediocre minds. These bhikkhus were not mediocre, unlike what the commentators or anybody who likes to end the sutta with the words, the bhikkhus were not delighted in the sutta, in hearing the words of the Tathāgata. That is simply misrepresentation of this beautiful Dhamma and the beautiful Dhamma talk the Buddha gave to us. And this does not do it justice, these 4 weeks that we spent. For this reason, I chose to translate it properly as it was supposed to be, as it was said in the first council, in the following manner. This is what the Blessed One said. And those bhikkhus were delighted in having carefully listened to these words spoken by the Blessed One. End of the Mūlapariyāya Sutta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Tremendous honor and privilege to be living and still having the Dhamma with us. May the Dhamma you hear, you expose yourself to, take you straight to Nibbāna. There's nothing wrong with the Dhamma. The Dhamma is proven through and through and through and through to be effective, to be visible here and now, immediately effective, and to be testable, to be tested by each and every one of us, challenging us with its authenticity, its repeatability, its testability, its accountability. But it's our accountability and responsibility that is usually in question, should be placed in question when it is not happening. Whatever it is that we want, whether it's peace, tranquility, awakening, insights, penetration through the facade. So next time you experience any of the 6 sense doors bringing you some data, see if there is any lurking thirst for delighting somewhere, any thirst for passion. Passion comes in many shapes and sizes, don't forget. So I will stop here and see if there are any questions. In that case, let us transfer some merit. Akasatha chabumata devānaga mahittika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabumata devānaga mahittika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devānaga mahittika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the triple gems blessings be with you all the time. May the privilege that you so well deservedly enjoy of having a body in this life having the precious individuals in your lives, people you care about, people close to your heart, in your life, in your thoughts, all of them, in all their nuances, help you to understand and penetrate the Dhamma each and every day, while all of you prosper in health, beauty, strength, wealth, resources necessary for you to sustain your life, this body, and all your other responsibilities. But above all, for you to make the most of this life and end this life as a conqueror and not as a defeat for you. This Dhamma ensures that we are given the right tools to become winners. And that's a stream winner already. Sotapanna, winning the stream, entered the stream of Dhamma. So may you and all your loved ones attain to nobility, to arahantship. I will, before I forget, next week we will not have the talk. We will resume back to our old schedule of every 2 weeks. So today would be the week where we have this Dhamma class of exposition of the Pali Suttas. So next week will be off week, and then the following one is when we will resume our normal schedule. So please continue, because I went fast, as you noticed, through the sutta today, this portion of the sutta today. So please review it at your own pace. It's a deep sutta, but I've said enough about that. Take good care of yourselves. Sukhi Hotu.